Hey guys, and in continuation of the Mage guides, let's talk about fire and how the mighty have fallen. Fire is in a weird place right now, and the 7.2.5 patch doesn't seem to bring anything new to it, in terms of spell changes or meaningful boosts, at least as the making of this video, so QQ on that one. Now, is that saying that Fire Mage is just awful and shouldn't be taken ever? And here's the thing, is Fire currently weaker than Frost? Yes. Frost is for sure the strongest mage spec as of this moment. Is that to say that Fire is outright bad? Yes and no. Before 7.1.5, Fire was very strong on any type of encounter, but then came the nerfs. Now Fire is still really strong in AoE, one of the best actually. But not that great in single target. Unless you have the right Legos, even so it still falls comparing to Frost and most other specs in the game. That said, if you want to play Fire, just play Fire, don't get so bogged down to numbers, logs and simulations. Just play what you have fun with. Unless you are in a mythic progression guild or just a bad guild or want to be competitive, it doesn't really matter. If you're playing the spec correctly, the damage will still be there to run most content, such as heroics and normal raids and mythic pluses where it shines the most. Now, I know that's meaningless to most of you since all we want is those numbers, and knowing that you have another spec right there that is better is kinda painful to play the weaker one. But if you really like Fire and hate Frost, just play Fire, man. You play the game monthly, might as well enjoy it. Plus, if you're playing something that you like, you tend to be better at it as opposed to be playing something that you dislike just because it's technically better in terms of them numbers. But anyway, does it need some tweaking? Yes, absolutely, but I would spend ages just talking about that, and I think I have digressed way too much. A topic for another time. Let's move on to the actual guide, shall we? Now, as always, you have your traits in the background if you so wish to know which best way to take, and the traits worthy of mention will be discussed when it's needed, okay? As for your stats, Fire Mage is all about them crits, mostly due to your passives. Hitting Up that you get after a direct spell damage crit, and Hot Streak that you get after 2 crits in a row. If those crits don't happen in succession, you lose the procs. Now, the reason that's important is because the main focus of Fire in single target is on Pyroblast, which naturally is on a big cast, but when you are in a hot streak proc, it becomes instant cast, and that is what you want. More crit equals more Pyroblast procs, or more Flame Strikes working in the same way but for multi-target. All of that equals more damage, since that's your highest damaging ability overall and your priority. Getting to the 50% crit will be the first mark that you want to reach as fast as possible, giving you a 50-50% chance to get your procs. Then only after is when you start focusing on intellect, as in increasing your E level. But even then, increasing your crit will still be one of your main priorities, and your damage will be vastly dependent on it. Then after, Mastery. Mastery also plays a big role in the Fire Mage because it gives you Ignite. The way Ignite works is for every spell that hits an enemy, a percentage of the damage done based on your stat will be dealt depending of how much damage that spell originally did. So if it did 100k and if you have 20% mastery, your Ignite will do 20k over the course of 9 seconds, spreading to nearby targets every 2 seconds as well. So perfect for AoE and cleave. Now, that effect stacks with your other abilities, refreshing its duration and increasing its damage. That said, even though the effect stacks, each tick will only last for its original duration. For an example, and I'm going to throw some random numbers here, okay? If your Pyro did 1 million crit, and with a mastery at 20%, Ignite will do 200k for 9 seconds. Then after, you do a Fireball, doing 300k, so 60k for Ignite, adding to a total of 260k. Now the effect will say it's lasting 9 seconds, but technically that original Pyro Ignite will only last for its original 9 seconds. So by the time you did that Fireball, the older Ignite is on about a 7-second duration, even though the effect as a whole is 9 seconds. Think of Ignite as having multiple little ignites under it, all doing their individual damage in their own time, but all of them come together to form your one dot. Make sense? Now, another thing about Mastery is that in single target isn't that powerful due to how your Ignite keeps resetting, if you will, just like I said. So you might get these windows where it does a lot of damage, especially during combustion, but then after that it's just going to tick down. But it's far more valuable when there's AoE or just multi-targeting where the Fire Mage as a whole shines the most. Either way, stacking it will be good for you nevertheless. Then after Mastery is Haste and Versatility, and they are both pretty close in value, although they can surpass Mastery in single target, but again, overall it's still better to stack Mastery as your secondary stat. That said, simming your stat weights are always a good way to figure out where your character stands in that certain point in time, as they can shift. Just to be completely sure you are stacking the right stats, do remember to sim your character every now and then, okay? Now let's move on to your talents and gameplay rotation. On tier 1, you have Fire Starter, and you shouldn't concern yourself too much about it, as it's only boosting you for the first 10% of health of an enemy for that crit chance. Basically useless for most situations, but there is a niche for it that it can be technically used, but more on that in a bit. Then Pyromaniac, and should only be used for single target, giving you a small chance at getting an extra hot streak after you used said proc. And although that's good on the surface and technically is, but once you get higher levels of crits, so more than 50%, getting that random chance is going to mess with your rotation more than anything. Because during your normal rotation, the way you want to consume a hot streak will be with a Fireball and Pyro combo, always. If with higher crit levels, there's a good chance those two spells will crit, giving you another hot streak immediately after that one, meaning having that chance at giving you a proc quite useless at that point, and you're just gonna over proc, if you will, as you could have get it without the talent anyway. However, it can still be good, as there's still a chance for you to get it when you didn't obtain that proc from the crit. So I'll leave that up to you. At lower crit levels though, it is far more valuable. As for Conflagration, comes close in damage, and if you have at least one more enemy, you should take it. So your go-to for AoE and cleave. Now once again, with high crit levels, if you don't want to have that unpredictability in your procs with Pyromaniac, having Conflagration in single target will be as good, if not even better, depending on your character. Tier 2, Blazing Soul in PvE content isn't really going to benefit you in any way. Blast Wave can be very situational, but is the only option that gives you extra damage and reduces movement of enemies, so can be good sometimes in dungeons and for kiting if needed. Shimmer though should be your go-to choice. It gives you 2 charges of your blink and allows you to use it without affecting your global cooldown, so meaning you can blink while casting or clicking your other abilities, so it's perfect for mobility and fire. Next tier, Mirror's Image, is currently your best choice for a solid DPS gain, fire and forgettability, but boosting your damage by a considerable margin for 40 seconds that it lasts. And the images do benefit from your stats, such as the crit from your combustion, making worthwhile comboing those 2 cooldowns. But they also get boosted by your base crit chance and haste, so as you get more powerful stats, so will your images. Now, it's kinda useless for any sort of multi-target. For that, you're going to either choose between Rune of Power or Incanter's Flow. Rune of Power can be really powerful when combined with Meteor and Living Bomb, which is your later talents, and moments where you can stay still to get its full duration buff, and just go on your AoE craze, getting that big damage boost, and is your go-to for cleave and AoE. However, in a lot of encounters you're going to need to move constantly, such as in a Mythic Plus. Incanter's Flow then coming close for those situations if you cannot use Rune of Power properly. Because Rune of Power seems to always pull ahead every time in fire, but only if you can take full use of it. So make up your own conclusion on when to use each talent and see what you are most comfortable with, okay? Fourth tier, Control Burn is in a way similar to Pyromaniac, and once again, its unpredictability makes it worthless comparing to the other choices. Flame On is your go-to for almost every situation, giving you an extra charge of Fire Blast and a cooldown reduction. Fire Blast takes a huge part in your proc generation, making it a must. Alexstrasza's Fury though should only be taken in AoE, especially in dungeons where you see yourself using Dragon's Breath frequently for that extra proc. But if you have that Lego head, it's a good choice to take anytime if you have 2 or more mobs present, be raid or dungeon. 5th tier, Ice Ward and Ring of Frost are practically useless for PvE. As for Frenetic Speed, should be your choice for that extra mobility where you have constant movement and you are obligated to use Scourge. More on that in a bit. On the 6th tier, Living Bomb is your most valuable spell for AoE or 2 or more targets, and is where most of your multi-target damage will come from, leaving a minimal dot for 4 seconds that then explodes, or before if the target dies, spreading more Living Bombs, meaning the more enemies present, more explosions it will create, equals one of the best AoE in-game. As for Flame Patch, can be good, but only when you have 2 or 3 targets in a sustained cleaving fight, meaning a boss similar to Botanist, where you would be looking at using Flame Strike every 8 seconds or so, keeping up that patch, building up for some pretty good damage. For most situations though, it's not really worth it. Unstable Magic is then your go-to for single target, is the only option that improves your damage in such encounters. Living Bomb is a DPS loss and so is Flame Patch. This way you're going to get a little extra damage on your fireballs without messing your single target rotation, okay? And finally, last tier. Kindling looks like it's the best talent at first, right? Reduction on the cooldown of your combustion, which equals more crits and damage. But actually, no, because a problem arises when you get that CD reduction, which is the inability to combine with your other cooldowns, such as Rune of Power if you're using an AoE, or Mirror's Image, along with trinkets. It kinda jumbles up your rotation, making it worse to use in most situations. Not to say that it's completely useless, it does have its niche when you need some frequent combustion uses to take down some priority targets, and you don't really need to combo all of your cooldowns together, but for the most part the other 2 choices are better. And one of those is Meteor, another fire and forgettability. Looks really cool and on the surface looks like an excellent AoE ability, because well, it's a meteor, but actually is your go-to for single targets. Why? Because its damage is split evenly between enemies, meaning if you do a 1 million hits on single targets and you repeat the same for 10 targets, the damage is going to be exactly the same, but just 100k per enemy. Okay, so it's kinda dumb, but hey. It takes about 2 seconds to come down and leaves a burn area on the ground that damages over time, so make sure to position that spell well. In general, it's a good ability to get a big chunk of damage combining well with combustion. Now, Cinderstorm is a far more interesting talent, bringing a lot of new thinking to your rotation. The way it works is that it's an aim type of ability, sending 6 cinders in a sort of an arc, so you actually need to aim it properly before using it. And also meaning the bigger the target, the easier it is to hit, okay? And the damage is substantial, but only if most cinders actually hit. It works great for cleave and AoE, providing more damage than Meteor due to the reasons that I said earlier, but slightly behind in single target. Now there's multiple ways you can use it, but to cover that will be better to do so during the rotation part, since there's quite a lot to say, okay? So, moving on to your rotation, starting with your opener, and we are using the following talents: Conflagration, Mirror's Image, Shimmer, Flame On, Unstable Magic, and Meteor. Basically the talents for pure single target fight, although again you are free to take Pyromaniac instead of Conflagration, okay? So, for your opener, there's multiple ways you can open on your Fire Mage, but I personally like to do it this way, and the idea here is to build up your Combustion first, which is your most powerful cooldown, okay? So first, pop your Mirror's Image before the pull. Your images are going to start damaging the enemy with fireballs, with some good damage for 40 seconds, and you want to precast that because you don't want to lose a global cooldown for it mid-combustion. Then do a Phoenix Flame and a Fire Blast, which are guaranteed crits, to get a hot streak proc for your pyro. As said before, the idea of fire is to build those procs, and you need 2 crits in succession to get it. If you get a heating up from an initial crit and your next spell doesn't crit, the proc fades. So you really need to crit twice. Fire Blast and Phoenix Flames are always granted to give you a crit, while your other abilities are solely based on your crit chance. By using those 2 spells in combo, it gives you a short chance on your hot streak, which is what you want right now, because when you enter combustion, you always want to have a hot streak proc active so you can start up the burst quickly. Then after that, use Meteor. It's a big nuke and it's going to do a lot of damage, but it's going to take about 1 to 2 seconds to come down, so make sure the boss is not going to move. Then pop your combustion, giving you that 100% chance to crit, plus 50% mastery, boosting your ignite, and then use that first pyro. By doing this, your meteor is going to get the benefit from combustion just before it lands, your images are also going to get boosted from the crit chance, and you can immediately enter your pyro train spam, getting all of them crits and powerful ignites. That said, before going further, 2 things. One is that you can technically precast a fireball or a pyro, being the optimal way you want to start a boss fight whenever possible, preferably right before the pull timer ends. Basically, you do a mirror's image, then do a hard cast pyroblast, and as the cast reaches the end, pop combustion immediately after, so you can crit and get heating up. And since he's out of your global cooldown, click Meteor at the same time, followed by Fire Blast, which again is out of your global cooldown as well. So you can click those 3 abilities at the same time. So now that you have Hot Streak, you want to follow with another Pyro as you enter the burst phase. This way, you'll be able to save a Phoenix Flames charge, which you're going to need for that set phase, and with very minimal global cooldown loss. Overall, the best way to do your opening. But if there's no pull timer, casting a fireball might be better so you don't lose that much time casting a pyro, as a fight is ongoing, or just use the previous method. The other thing is Pyretic Incantation, which is one of your traits. What it does is, each direct crit is going to give you a damage buff, 2% extra crit damage, stacking up 5 times for 10%. But similar to hitting up, if you don't crit in succession, you lose those stacks. Now optimally, you want to enter combustion with the full or near full stacks so you can completely exploit combustion and take full advantage out of that buff. The problem is that you want to combine combustion with your other cooldowns, Meteor and Mirror's Image, making so combining quite difficult if you delay in hopes of getting those stacks. Unless you are lucky, it's going to screw you over more than anything. And in the long run, you're going to have less combustion uses when delaying. Plus, if you do it like I said, you get 2 stacks from that hot streak, plus 1 more from that first pyro, so isn't too bad, although you can try it for yourself, but in general, like I said, I don't personally like to be at the mercy of the RNG, so feel free to test on your own. Now, you can make a decision, which is, instead of Meteor, take Cinderstorm, which brings another type of thinking into the table, making it perfect to achieve those 5 stacks of Pyretic Incantation, so basically the same as before, Mirror's Image, Fire Blast and Phoenix Flames, or precast a fireball pyro if you so wish, and then instead of a meteor, use Cinderstorm, making sure you are close to the targets since it's an aim ability. And just as the cinders are about to launch, pop combustion, and you're going to get immediately all of those 5 stacks of pyretic, because each cinder counts as an individual spell. Now the problem is that in the long run, Cinderstorm will be weaker than Meteor in pure single target fights, as said before, which is quite sad because it offers great gameplay decisions, but Meteor is currently better at this point. But more on Cinderstorm again in a bit. Now, back to what I was saying previously. So you just use all of your cooldowns, your combustion is up, and you use your first pyro. Since you always want to crit in this phase, you're going to get a heating up after. Now, what you want to do is fit as much pyros as you can in your combustion phase, because it's your hardest hitting ability and your most important one overall, and what fire is all about in single target. and not only going to crit all the time, but all of those pyros, and that one meteor is going to put a hefty ignite in there due to combustion also boosting your mastery by 50%. So how do you fit as much pyros as you can? Simple. When you enter combustion, you always want to make sure you have at least 2 stacks of Fire Blast and Phoenix Flames. And we are going to talk further on how to use it again, but in mid-fight instead of your opener, since it can be slightly different to do. Now what you want to do is Fire Blast to turn that first hitting up to Hot Streak, then Pyro. Fire Blast, Pyro again. Have no Fire Blast charges, then Phoenix Flames, and Pyro, and just repeat until you are out of charges between those two abilities. Usually when you do, your combustion ends. That's when you know you pull it off correctly. But with your new traits, that increases its duration, and during Lust, that gives you more haste, meaning faster global cooldowns, meaning you can fit more pyros. You might get to a point in your last 2 to 4 seconds or so of combustion that you have no charges during Lust or out of it. If that happens, and whenever it happens, is the only time you want to do a Fireball and Pyro combo during combustion. But if you have charges of either Fire Blast or Phoenix Flames, that always has priority because you don't want to waste precious combustion time on casting fireballs, only as a last resort. However, casting Scorch instead of Fireball in those last 2 to 4 seconds will be better due to its faster cast time, and you'll be able to fit 1 or 2 extra pyros, okay? Thankfully though, Fire Blast cooldown is also boosted by your haste, so during Time Warp helps a bit. Now all of that combined, combustion, mirror's image, and that pyro spam, along with the powerful ignite, is going to give you a pretty good boost to your damage and your opener. And good combustion uses in fire actually takes a big toll in your overall damage. But what do you want to do during your normal rotation without being in combustion? Well, it's actually rather simple, but there's some management to do as well, especially in preparation for your next combustion and burst phase. So when out of combustion, your idea is still the same. Build as much pyros as you possibly can. To do that, you're going to spam your fireball until you get a hitting up, and you also have Enchant Pyrotechnics, which boosts your fireball crit chance by 10% every time it doesn't crit, so it's almost like a bad luck protection. Then once you get that hitting up, you're still going to cast that next fireball, and then do a Fire Blast mid-cast to get a Hot Streak Pyroblast. Fire Blast is out of your global cooldown, and can be used while you are casting a spell, and you solely want to use it to get your hot streak. Don't ever use it to get your heating up. Then you just continue to do that. If that fireball and pyro crit, you get another hot streak, so you just do the same. Another fireball, pyro. If only one of them crits and you get heating up, then you just repeat what I said previously. Fire Blast mid-cast and pyro, always with that rotation. Now what about Phoenix Flames? Well, it's in a much longer cooldown than Fire Blast, and you want to save it for the most part for your second combustion, but you also don't want it to overcap charges. So depending on the time left on your combustion cooldown, you can use your Phoenix Flame in combination with your Fireball to get a heating up. So a Fireball and Phoenix Flames. If Fireball crits together, great, you get a hot streak. If not, you just get a heating up from Phoenix Flames, and you just repeat what you did previously. Fireball, Fire Blast mid-cast, Pyro. So think of Phoenix Flames as a heating up builder and Fire Blast as a hot streak one. That said, Phoenix Flames are to be saved for combustion. You only want to use it when you have a long time left on your combustion cooldown or you are closing in on your 3 charges. You don't want them to just sit around. They are on a 40-second cooldown, but one of your ignite traits have a chance to make it erupt and reducing Phoenix Flames cooldown by 10 seconds. So keep an eye on its charges. Try not letting them overcap and use them to get your procs when the opportunity arises. Then after that, you also want to fit in your next meteor during your normal rotation. You only want to use your first meteor with combustion, then that solo meteor, then save the third one for your second combustion, okay? Just use it if you know that your second combustion isn't going to be needed. Now, what about if you have no Fire Blast charges and can't waste your Phoenix Flames? The only thing you can do is hope for a Fireball to crit in succession, right? there's nothing you can do. But Cinderstorm again adds an interesting dynamic, because it's the only ability that you have that you can use in a consistent basis and that it doesn't break your heating up. So if you're using it, you can just weave it in and just fill time waiting for your Fire Blast to come off cooldown, making the most out of your time, procs, and spec, and then just repeat your combo. But again, it's extremely sad that the damage isn't really there to compete with Meteor. So moving on. Now, the way you want to prepare for your combustion mid-fight is two things, which is again about your charges. You want to make sure you have 2 charges of Fire Blast ready to be used before it, and at least 2 of Phoenix Flames as well, along with a Hot Streak proc. So to do that, you need to keep a constant eye on its cooldown and charges, okay? So when you get that Hot Streak and your Combustion and Mirror's Image is out of cooldown, you want to stop doing your fireballs, then pop Mirror's Image, Meteor, Pyro and Combustion together. Remember that Combustion is out of your global cooldown, so you can click with your other abilities at the same time. And just repeat the same as previous. Fire Blast with Pyros and Phoenix Flames with Pyros when out of Fire Blast charges, just wasting all of those charges to fit in as many Pyros as humanly possible, okay? That's pretty much all you need to know. The Fire Mage is all about managing your procs, both in your sustained damage and during your combustion, along in preparation for it. Now, if you have the Lego Bracers, which is one of your best in slots like I do, so get salty, you just want to hardcast a Pyro middle in the middle of your rotation, just like if it was a long cast of a Fireball. As for your waste, I believe it is a waste, that boosts your Scourge damage by 350% when enemies are below 30% health, you just want to switch using it instead of fireballs at all times during that percentage of HP, almost like an execute phase. And those 2 Legos are your best in slots, and they are going to make Fire Mage a little bit more competitive. Another thing about Fire Mage is movement. You can do a lot with it, not only with your Shimmer that you can use while casting spells, but remember that in between your instant Pyro procs, you can gain some ground, taking advantage out of your global cooldowns, okay? As you can see on the video. The other thing to keep in mind is if you are in a constant movement phase, your Scourge can be used while doing so, plus giving you a bunch of movement speed buffs, so make sure to make good use of it. As a Fire Mage, you have no excuse to stop doing your damage. There's always a way. As for AoE and cleave, your rotation is not going to change much, okay? A big part of your damage is going to come from Ignite. The only question to ask yourself is when to use Flame Strike and Dragon's Breath. Well, the first thing before that is that you want to have a Living Bomb, talented. It's a must, unless, as said before, it's in a sustained cleaving fight of around 2 to 3 enemies. A Flame Patch is then better. Along with Living Bomb is Rune of Power, because Mirror's Image is going to be quite useless, but if it's just 2 targets or you want the extra damage for Mythic Plus bosses, you can stick with it. And then Cinderstorm. Your Meteor, even though it's a fucking Meteor, is only good for single target or around 3 enemies. More than that isn't that powerful, because again the damage splits. Cinderstorm will be better for you then. As for Alexstrasza's Fury, as said before, if you have the Lego, always use in 2 mob situations, if not only use it for dungeons or when you're going to use it frequently. So, when to choose between using Flame Strike or Pyro? It's actually quite simple. If you have 2 mobs, you use Pyro. If it's 3 to 4 or more, you use Flame Strike. That's when the damage will be about the same as Pyro, and then it's going to start to pass the Pyro damage, okay? So your AoE rotation is going to be about popping up your Living Bomb at first and keep it active as much as you can. That's your priority. Then Rune of Power, if you have it, Phoenix Flames, that is going to cleave all around, and apply Ignite, plus giving you a heating up. Then Fire Blast, you get a Hot Streak, then Flame Strike, then Dragon's Breath, if close, within a Cinderstorm when the mobs are in a good position, and use Phoenix Flames again and a Fire Blast for another Flame Strike. And basically just use all of those spells together, trying to get as much Flame Strikes as you can, using your Rune of Power when most of your abilities are ready to be used in combo, keeping up Living Bomb, and that's basically it. And you are in for a feast of numbers flying around. The only thing to keep in mind is to make sure the mobs are positioned well, since your AoE is really going to depend on that, and a good Living Bomb placement. Always try to put in a mob that is about to die as it explodes earlier, okay? Once you have nothing to use, just fill with your fireball. Pretty simple. And that covers everything. Now, as said in the beginning of the video, Fire Mage is in a weird spot. Your single target damage isn't that great. One of the worst in the game right now. If you have the Bracer Lego and Waste, is going to compete slightly. Even so, is still falling behind. But the key in improving the Fire Mage damage in single targets would be quite simple. Just adding a talent, boosting your Ignite, making it more powerful by either a flat damage increase or like ticking it twice. Something like that would help the Fire Mage immensely. Sadly though, there's no light at the end of the tunnel. But if you are from the future and some miracle happened, yay! As always, if you have any questions, feel free to drop them down below. Subscribe and like for more guides and wow videos. Have fun guys, and see ya.